today we're going to be talking about navigating behavioral changes and memory loss. So this is really focused for folks who are providing that care, but can be open to anyone. This could be providers who are also working with these patients or individuals. So hoping you learn something new or just get refreshed on something you already knew before. So today's agenda, so we're going to just do a brief overview of, understanding what does dementia mean. There are different, obviously, types of dementia that one can have. So talking just briefly about that again. Going over what sort of behavior and things can come up when folks are experiencing different types of dementia. We're going to be reviewing a different lens to be able to look through when we're working with these different behaviors. So the person, environment, and you. We're going to go over some practical approaches and strategies that you can use when working with someone or being their caregiver. Again, some of these things might be new to you. Some of these things are things you may have tried already, but just give you some new ideas of things that you could use in your day-to-day. We're going to talk more a bit about when it's time to maybe get more help or support, how to know when to move forward with that, and who to ask. And then we're also just going to make sure you know about some resources and supports that are out there. There's lots of good information, but we want to make sure you're kind of going to the right places to find that. And again, who's helpful to ask and where can you identify these different things. So again, dementia is really, it's not a specific disease, so it is a more of an umbrella term for a collection of symptoms that can be caused by a number of different disorders that affect the brain. So usually the common one that people think about is Alzheimer's disease, but there are certainly others that people can be diagnosed with. This could be frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia, Parkinson's disease dementia. So this really can look different for different people. So to know we're not just referencing Alzheimer's disease, dementia is more of just, again, that umbrella that kind of encompasses all those different diseases or diagnoses. So dementia does cause some physical damage to the brain, and that's why we see some of these changes. So over time, these brain cells can die, the neurons, and then different areas of the brain can shrink or just stop working. And since you can see in the picture that different areas of the brain control different functions of our day-to-day and our personality and emotions and things, that means that it can in turn affect how someone might behave. So an analogy I like to use, or something that can be helpful to think about, is imagining the brain just like a network of roads. So some roads might get blocked or others disappear completely and messages aren't able to reach their destination. So oftentimes this may show up in a change in behavior or how someone shows up in the world day to day. So as you can see, it really depends on diagnoses. Sometimes for some, like frontotemporal dementia, the frontal lobe is really the one that's affected most. So things like self-control, social behavior, disinhibited behavior, that can really come up for people for that. But again, it really depends on where things are happening in the brain, what kind of changes you might notice. So the brain just, has a hard time processing and storing new information. Changes can happen suddenly, or it can be kind of slowly over time that you start noticing that things are looking different. But a big thing to think about is that these behavioral changes aren't intentional, right? They're really just symptoms of what's happening in the brain. So to remember that, I've probably referenced that a few times throughout this presentation, because sometimes it can feel very personal, but to remember it is the dementia, and that's kind of what's causing these changes for that individual. So caregiver strain, I'm sure a lot of you here are either a caregiver or somebody who works with somebody who has some sort of dementia or, is in some sort of realm in which you interact with them. But caregiver strain can be very real and impact people very much. So I put a statistic up there. Nearly 60% of Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers rate the emotional stress of caregiving as high or very high. So This statistic came from a joint study between the Alzheimer's Impact Movement and the Alzheimer's Association. I think that was around 2020. But what does that tell us? That tells us that being a caregiver is a really meaningful job, but also can be incredibly hard, can bring frustration, burnout, exhaustion. Usually the person's not only taking care of this person, but they're also, taking care of themselves, their family, they might have a job. So it can be really kind of taxing on the person doing that caregiving. It also can be really hard to see the person maybe with dementia acting in different ways from their old self. That can be really just difficult to see or deal with. So that certainly also impacts that. So why do I bring this up? And why does that relate to this presentation today? So sometimes when we understand why certain behaviors happen, they can feel more manageable if we maybe learn strategies to respond to them in different ways or more effective ways. Maybe if you're, understanding why this person keeps wandering out of the house, and you're able to try something new and it ends up working, that can just bring some frustration off your plate or kind of give you a new sense of achievement in that moment or something to try going forward. So, having this education won't necessarily remove all the challenges that can come with working with someone with dementia, but it can make, a big difference in how we cope with some of these things and how we care for ourselves. But so sometimes it's just helpful to learn a bit more about maybe what we can do or how we can better support. But know that, it is a really hard thing to be a caregiver. So you matter as well. And we want to make sure you're supported in is best way that we can support. So I put a little guy up in the corner here who's doing some, he's got a spyglass, he's doing some detective work, it looks like. So in regards to why behaviors happen, it's not just the dementia, right? We did talk about how there are changes in the brain and that's why, different behaviors might arise or things just look different. But we really want to think about this in kind of three different areas. So the person, the environment, and by the person with the dementia, the environment, and then the caregiver or whoever's kind of working with them. That could also be a provider or case manager, doctor, anyone. So we want to think about these three different buckets when we're assessing, what a behavior might mean. So the first one is a person. So obviously we talked about earlier, there are different types of dementia, right? So understanding maybe which type of dementia your loved one or person you're caring for has, and maybe how far along in that journey they are. So if that's something relatively new, or are they, years down the line where they've been really experiencing these things for quite some time, that can really impact, the severity or how often these things come up for them, but really just making sure you have an understanding of that. Another big one is unmet physical or emotional needs. So thinking about things like, is this person hungry? Are they in some sort of pain? Are they bored? Are they lonely? So these different things can lead to behaviors, especially if they're not able to verbally communicate that is going on for them. It's helpful to think about what basic needs might or might not be being met. Another big one is medical or mental health conditions. So definitely things like an illness, infections, sometimes a common one might be a UTI, underlying depression or anxiety, medication side effects. These can also cause sudden changes. So again, they might not be able to describe with words. So just thinking on, what sort of things this person may be already struggling with. For example, if you already know at baseline, they have anxiety and that's something that's been lifelong. Thinking about it from that perspective, or if they just started taking a new medication, what might those side effects be? When did they take that medication last? Personality and preferences. So again, thinking about this person as a whole person, not just someone with dementia. Our lifelong traits can influence how we might respond to different things. So really honoring that person's identity and getting to know them on a personal level. So if someone's always hated peas their whole life and you try to give them a dinner and it's just full of peas and they, maybe start yelling, refuse to eat, instead of saying, oh, that's the dementia, think about that's just something they've never liked. So I won't do that next time. And then another big one are sensory changes. So things like vision or hearing loss that can increase confusion, which can be, lead to things like fear or withdrawal. So really thinking about that person. The next one is the environment. So changes in routine. An example of this from recently, I had a caregiver I was talking to, and her spouse had just returned from a hospital stay. He was in TCU for a bit. She said he had come home and was asking more repetitive questions. And we talked through a bit about how, his day-to-day routine really had been impacted. He was in, 2 different places. He hadn't been home a while. So thinking about that might kind of increase his anxiety or resistance to things. He's not used to his normal routine at home. So kind of getting him back into that. And we talked about strategies that could be helpful. Unfamiliar people or busy spaces. So, if there's somebody new coming into the home, maybe that's a friend, a family member, a new caretaker, that could certainly impact the way someone behaves. Really busy or crowded spaces can oftentimes feel overwhelming. Or sometimes people have a hard time following the conversation, so that can really impact how they show up. Other things like too much or too little lighting. So poor lighting or really cluttered spaces can lead to misinterpretation of the surroundings. That would obviously increase things like fear. Again, noise levels, a really loud or chaotic environment could lead to, agitation or some sensory overload. I'm guilty of this one often, fast talkers, not being able to keep up with the conversation because it seems to be going, too fast, or there's not a lot of pauses or times to jump in. Things like that could increase agitation or sadness or anxiety. And then things like uncomfortable temperatures, right? No one likes to be too hot or too cold, and especially if you're unable to express that discomfort or restlessness, that's something also to think about. So, what's going on in the environment around them? Is there a new change? Is there something that's different, or something that they just have a hard time with? And the last one is the caregiver, right? So communication style. As I said before, fast speech can certainly be something that impacts them. Using complex language, a negative tone, your nonverbals, if you're really, not standing maybe in front of them, looking them in the eye, if you're just kind of avoiding them, they really kind of are able to feel how your presence is, and that can certainly impact their emotional state as well. Again, a knowledge and understanding of dementia. So, if you're misunderstanding symptoms as difficult behavior, that can lead to frustration for you, right? They're just doing this because they don't want to do it, and they're being resistant rather than thinking about these other reasons that this could be coming up. Your own stress or emotions. So again, we talked about before, it can be really hard to be a caregiver. So assessing your own mood and stress levels can unintentionally impact that person's behavior. So, if you're coming in for the day and you're already really stressed out, you're pretty agitated, you don't really want to be there, they might pick up on that. So really, again, tending to your own needs, getting a sense of where you're at before you do have these interactions. And then expectations. So again, sometimes our expectations might be too high or unrealistic. So expecting them to function in a way that they just can't anymore can really create this sort of tension or almost failure. So again, throughout this presentation, I want you all to think of this as being a detective. We're going to kind of keep all these in the back of our mind as we think about different behaviors that could come up or common things that folks with dementia experience. So even if I don't specifically touch on these things, I still have a little thing at the bottom of the screen helping us to remember that these are all helpful things to think about. All right, so some key points to remember that I just think can be really helpful. Behavior in itself is a form of communication. So Again, just pausing to ask yourself, what might this behavior be telling me? Again, you can go back to the last slide. Might it be telling me that this person's bored? They've been just sitting at the table for an hour, and maybe now they're trying to get up and leave, or they're getting really agitated. Well, what can we do? Could we get them an activity? Could I sit and talk with them? What are they trying to communicate through whatever it is that you see that they are doing? The disease, again, is not responsible. Disease is responsible, not the person. So, kind of operating from this initial belief that really, if this person didn't have this dementia, they probably wouldn't be acting this way. So, trying to separate the behavior from the person that you know and love, and to just remind yourself that, it's nothing against you. They're not doing it on purpose. If they didn't have dementia, would this be happening? Probably not. Each individual's experience is unique. So, we're going to go through various things throughout this PowerPoint, but knowing that you see something today or hear something today, that doesn't mean that the person that you're caring for with dementia maybe will experience something on this list. So, everyone is different, and everyone's dementia experience is so different. So, approaching each person with curiosity and openness rather than assumptions. So, not assuming this is going to happen for them. Also remembering that what works for one person might not work for another. It really is trial and error, seeing, what their preferences are, what seems to be really helpful for them. And knowing sometimes that takes a little bit of tweaking, takes a little bit of time. This is a big one. So empathy over reasoning. So oftentimes, maybe our initial gut reaction is to argue or correct someone with dementia. Sometimes that's not even on purpose. Again, it could just be us out of frustration or stress. But this often just makes the situation more tense. So if possible, it's really helpful just to try to meet them where they're at, validate their feelings, even if the facts aren't accurate. A nice little quote that you can write down or keep in the back of your mind, connection over correction. So it's really hard not to want to say, that's not quite right, but really in the end, that's going to create more hardships probably for you and for this person than just trying to connect to them in a way, and know that it's okay if that's not necessarily true or fact. Some things are not in our control, but some things are. So this one can be really tough for people, certainly, especially if we're watching maybe a loved one specifically go through this. But, we're not always able to change some things, like this person having this dementia, the progression of the disease. But know there are things that you can control, like your reactions, again, the environment, how you might respond to these different behaviors. So all these small adjustments can make a really big difference, and just reminding yourself that there are things that you can do to create a sense of safety and comfort and dignity for this person. Because when we feel out of control, that's when we start to see that our anxiety increases, then in turn their anxiety increases. And finally, just remembering or keep in the back of your mind, is this something that's irritating versus dangerous? And you could switch out the word irritating for something else, but knowing that not all, of these quote unquote behaviors need to be fixed. So, really asking yourself, is this something that's truly harmful? Is it dangerous? Or is it just something that really challenges you? So we know that these things can come up quite a bit. So we really want you to, save your energy for what truly matters. So maybe an example of this is, if the person is telling the same story over and over and over, maybe that's irritating or challenges you, but it maybe requires a lot different reaction than if that person's trying to leave the home in a really angry manner, right? What things can we let go versus what things do we really need to pause and say, okay, we need to do something in this moment, or we need to put on our little hat and mic or hat and our I'm forgetting what it's called, the little guy from earlier where he was trying to figure out what was going on, or is it something that we can let go? All right, so we're going to talk about some various maybe challenges that might come up for someone with dementia. Again, just because you see something on this list doesn't mean it might happen for the person that you are caring for. Know that these can happen at different stages as well, right? So a lot of these things might be in the more moderate stage versus late stage, but that's not always the case. Again, really knowing the specific diagnosis and talking to your doctor about symptoms or things that you're noticing. But some common ones could be things like anger, aggression, wandering, experiencing withdrawal or apathy, repetition, as we kind of referred to earlier, sundowning, and hallucinations and delusions. So this is a limited list as well. There are certainly other things that can come up that we might not talk about today, but these just can be some common ones or ones that folks might struggle with the most. Right, so that first one is aggression and agitation. So again, at the bottom here, we see pause and ask what's going on with the person, the environment, and me, the caregiver. We want to just keep that in the back of our mind always. What this can look like. Again, every person is different, so it might not look exactly like this, but these are ways it could show up. So things like fidgeting, increased irritability. This could be yelling or being really, snapping. This could be something more serious like hitting, kicking, pushing, swearing. They might have more clenched fists, notice some angry facial expressions. This could show up as refusing cares or refusing to do different things. So what can you do in these moments? Identify and reduce triggers. Again, kind of thinking about that environment. If we know that they don't like peas and someone goes and brings them a plate full of peas, maybe that's going to make them really snappy, or they're going to refuse to eat that, or that's going to maybe set them off. So knowing what things maybe specifically trigger them and either taking those out of the environment or taking the person out of that environment. Stay calm and reassuring. So this one's going to pop up throughout the presentation quite a bit. So do your best to be positive and reassuring to that person again. Consider your own tone, speak slowly, speak in a soft voice. If you start kind of escalating and also getting angry or aggressive, it's just going to be kind of you two going back and forth. So to the best of your ability, just try to remain calm, even if inside you're really frustrated. Acknowledge their feelings. That's always a good one. Like rather than focusing on the specific details, consider their emotions that might be happening in that moment. So maybe saying, hey, Kayla, I see that you're really frustrated right now. How can I help? That might be a better way to address that than, you're going to eat the dinner that's in front of you and that's just how it's going to be. Redirect gently or offer distraction. Again, this one's going to pop up frequently throughout this presentation as well. So that immediate situation or activity may have, again, unintentionally caused this response. So trying something different, that might be an example we're using, saying, hey, I know you really love mashed potatoes. Would you like me to get some of those for you? And even could be redirecting to a different activity, something that they enjoy. Again, try to avoid arguing or correcting. You oftentimes won't win this, and this frequently leads to just tension and increased anger. So trying to stay calm and reassuring, as we said earlier. Again, develop some calming and soothing rituals. So knowing what this person likes, if they like music, massage, exercise, puzzles, making sure to have some of those things around if you just need to use that redirect and distraction to be able to give them something to calm their body, calm their mind, give them something else to think about. And again, prioritize safety for all involved. So if it really is getting to a point where you're needing assistance from others, maybe there's no one around, it's okay to call for additional assistance. And sometimes that would be, in the worst case scenario, if you need to call 911, if it is a really dangerous situation. Just in those situations, definitely let them know that this person has dementia and, maybe you've tried X, Y, and Z, and you're still just more support, but really keeping your safety and their safety in mind if it's really escalating. Sundowning is our next one. So sundowning can occur for some folks. So what this can look like, this is typically in the afternoon or the evening hours, kind of as you head into night. So for some, it could be pacing, wandering, just seeming pretty restless, having increased confusion or agitation, again, in that late afternoon and evening. This could be, them following you closely or having this quote shadowing behavior. Again, if there's a lot of care routines in the evening, maybe it's a resistance to doing these. Difficulty sleeping or increased waking throughout the night, or just some general disorientation. So what are things that you can do? Keeping a regular daily routine can be helpful. So again, this might be something that pops up throughout the presentation as well, but structure and routine are really great for folks who are experiencing a dementia. So this might be scheduling, more tedious or maybe not so fun activities earlier in the day, such as things like doctor's appointments or bathing in the morning, or in the earlier afternoons when they're more alert and that it's a better time for them. But keeping things to a schedule, if able, can be really, really helpful. Try to allow for them to get some sunlight or exercise throughout the day. If they're just sitting in their chair all morning, maybe it would make sense that they're feeling really restless and then they want to get up and kind of move around. So when possible, maybe spend outside, get some exercise, get some sunlight to keep their circadian rhythm on at the right track. Limit daytime napping. Again, if you know that they struggle with sundowning, or this comes up more for them, and they want to have a 3-hour nap earlier, try to limit that or make it shorter, just so they don't have so much trouble sleeping at night, or they aren't as awake because they took that long nap. Avoid caffeine, as well as things like alcohol, or nicotine, which also can, impact their sleep or their alertness later in the evening. Reduce overstimulation in the afternoon or evening. So maybe not the best time to be watching a really loud action movie yet. High volume. Maybe don't do a whole lot of activities like we're going to clean the whole house or listen to loud music. So these things like distractions could just add to their confusion. And then keep a well-lit home in the evening. So that can help reduce the person's confusion about time of day, and also just keep them on track with what they're doing. Minimize clutter as well can be helpful. Again, and encourage some calming activities. So offering for them to maybe listen to their favorite music, look at photographs, watch their favorite movie at a lower volume, things that can just, again, calm their body and their mind. And then just offer comfort and reassurance. So, if you find them, pacing quite a bit, or they're agitated, could you take a short walk with them to help reduce that restlessness? Is there a way that you can help them, get some of that energy out together? That often would be really comforting for them. And if someone does wake in the middle of the night, be sure to really approach them in a calm manner. That could be frightening, especially if there's no lights on or they're not sure who you are. So being really calm as you do that, figuring out if there's something that they need. Again, what unmet need might be causing this. And you could certainly gently remind them of the time and try to redirect back to that. Repetition. I know this one certainly comes up for a lot of folks. And what this can look like is, oftentimes repeating the same question or story multiple times. This could also be repeating words, phrases, or sounds, checking the time, calendar, or the environment over and over. So someone could be, saying, see, I have an appointment later this week. And I go back to the calendar and point out that appointment again later this week, and over and over. Also repetitive movements. So maybe things like tapping their finger, rubbing their hands together, shaking their leg, just really, seeming like things are, again, repetitive, and it's hard to help them stop. So what things can you do? Again, as usual, we want you to respond with patience to the best of your abilities. So provide that reassurance in the calm voice. Oftentimes, if it's appropriate or they are open to it, often a gentle touch, maybe on the shoulder or the hand. Avoid the use of argument or logic, and make your responses as brief and simple as possible. Focus on the emotion over the behavior. So rather than reacting to what that person is doing, think about how he or she is feeling. So again, if they're going to the calendar and they're kind of pointing out a doctor's appointment that they have later this week, maybe they're feeling anxious about it, right? They're going to go see their neurologist. Maybe pointing out, like, I see that you might feel anxious about this appointment. I will go with you. Or, if maybe for them, it's taking that reminder out of the environment and just reminding them that morning, we have an appointment today. So knowing what's helpful for them and really thinking about why it could be happening. Try to avoid remember. This one can be tough, and I'm sure I've been guilty of this in the past. It's usually rarely helpful to point out the repetitions, as this can make them feel maybe embarrassed, angry, or defensive. So if able, just try to repeat the answers patiently or try another strategy. Again, they're asking again, so they don't remember that they've already asked that. So pointing that out oftentimes isn't the best in that situation. Offering comfort items, we've spoken about this one already, but this repetition could reduce some sort of anxiety. So knowing items that bring them a sense of calm. Sometimes engaging the senses can be more effective than words. So, if you do find that somebody is maybe doing things like tapping or rubbing hands, is there something that is there like a stuffed animal that they would like to hold or be able to rub? Or if they're tapping, is there some sort of activity that you can incorporate that includes tapping? So how can we make this more comforting for them? Providing structured activities is also helpful. So again, this person might simply be bored and the only thing that they have to do in that moment is to go check the calendar. So providing structure and engaging the person in an activity that they enjoy can be helpful. Written reminders or cues, again, this can be helpful for some and not helpful for others. But, if they're asking the same thing over and over again, you could put down in writing what you want them to remember, or this could be a Post-it note. This could be increasing the amount of clocks you have, calendars, photographs. So just having those reminders written out if that's accessible for them. So you're either able to reference it or they can kind of see it right away. Again, for some, maybe too many reminders or too many things written down isn't the most helpful. So kind of assessing what's best for them. Distract, redirect, or ignore. We talk about distraction quite a bit, right? Is it just that they're bored and they need something else to do? Could we redirect to something else? Ignoring, for some, this might work, right? If we don't provide an answer, then it's possible that the behavior does stop. But for some people, that might make them feel not listened to. It could make them feel angry. So in that case, if you found that that's not a helpful thing to do, again, provide more of these simple, short responses. And probably the biggest thing from this is, if able, accept the behavior and take a break, right? Repetition can be really frustrating or difficult for caregivers, understandably. So, if you need to take a step out, if you need to have someone else come in, if you just need to go to the other room, know that that's okay, but really do an assessment of where you're at and know that it's okay if you need to try different things. But, sometimes if it's not harmful, can we just live with it and then kind of manage ourselves in that moment. All right, our next one is apathy and withdrawal. So what does this look like? So apathy in general is just more of a loss of interest in enjoyed activities, things that maybe this person used to really like doing. That could look like just sitting quietly for long periods of time. Reduced emotional responses. Maybe they used to get really excited about a certain person coming over or a certain TV show coming on. It just seems like they're uninterested in that at this point. It could be a reluctance to participate in social events or gatherings. If there's a coffee hour at your local church and they maybe decide, I don't want to go to that anymore. It could look like decreased motivation, not wanting to do these things day to day that they used to do. Their facial expression might be a bit more flat, right? We're not seeing them have the range of emotions that they used to. And just sleeping more, eating less. Again, for that, we want to, again, pause and ask ourselves what kind of the person, the environment, and caregiver, if it does seem very serious, especially with the sleeping more, eating less, thinking about if that's something that you might want to consult with a provider about. But it could just be, there is just an increase in this apathy. So what can you do as a caregiver or helping person? Gently encourage participation or conversation. So things that maybe feel small are actually pretty big to them. So a hello, a smile can make them certainly feel included, even if it doesn't seem like they're so interested in whatever is going on or that they want to continue engaging. So it can be tempting to take over tasks for them. Just because you want to get things done more quickly, but this can also really impact things like confidence over time. So really focusing on the things that they can achieve and not the things that they can't do. So encouraging that participation in things that they used to like. Offer simple but meaningful activity. Giving them a chance to contribute and have a sense of control and build confidence might be giving them a task to do for the day or, something that they used to enjoy, but maybe it's in a simpler form. So if they really love puzzles, but, their normal size puzzles seem too big, maybe giving them a smaller one, knowing that that's something that they can complete. It would bring them that sense of achievement, maybe give them that sense of purpose or improve their self-esteem in that moment. So knowing it's okay to kind of adjust activities and things that they used to do so they can still find that meaning and that joy in them. Engaging one-to-one versus in a large group setting. So going to, again, maybe that coffee group feels like kind of too much right now. How could you make sure that they still have this engagement with somebody, whether that be yourself or someone else, that maybe feels safer or less overwhelming? And that could even be, if you did go to that coffee hour, maybe sitting on the edge of the room and having someone come over and just sit with them and talk. So they're still there, they're still with everyone, but they don't feel like it's too much going on at once, knowing that one-to-one time might be a little bit easier right now. Providing that patience and encouragement again, right? Your calm presence might help them feel more at ease. Focusing on just listening and understanding what they're going through. Again, I'm guilty of the fast talking, but really allowing those moments of silence and just sitting with them. That could be, again, if appropriate, gentle touch or just doing something together, even if you're not chatting away. Keeping that daily routine can be helpful in providing that reassuring structure and incorporating, again, some of those activities that suit their preferences and personalities. So, if they like to be out in the garden with you, knowing that maybe tomorrow that will be on the agenda or part of their routine is to go outside together and sit in the garden. And avoid scolding or blaming. So we really don't want to blame this person for being lazy or unhelpful or uncaring, right? This isn't a conscious choice that they're making. It's, again, something that could be happening in their brain. It's something that, they don't want to be happening to them. So, if you're feeling frustrated with it, trying to remain as calm as you can and keeping in mind your own emotional state as well. Wandering. So wandering does, according to the Alzheimer's Association, happen for 6 in 10 people with dementia. They will wander at least once in their progression of the disease. So it is an important one to go over, even if it's something that person you're caring for hasn't experienced. But what can this look like? So this could be walking around without a clear purpose. It could be the person trying to leave their house or the facility that they live in, or maybe just even the room that you're in together, if that's out in the community. It could look like someone looking for someone that they used to know or that they know now. Where's Kayla? Where'd she go? It could be them requesting to go home or to go to work or do things that they used to do. Again, restlessness, pacing, just a general confusion, maybe leaving at unusual times, or for some who maybe are still driving or doing some things independently, returning from things later than usual. So what sort of things can you do? And I will say there's, this is kind of a brief overview of this information, but there's a lot of good, more in-depth planning and ideas around this. On the Alzheimer's Association, as well as some other resources. So if it is something that someone you know is struggling with, it's definitely a good idea to look into that, because it is can be, a dangerous situation. So creating a safe and structured environment. Again, keep routines consistent to reduce confusion. We'll talk a lot about keeping the environment secure. That's a few bullet points down, but there's a lot you can do with the environment to make sure that they're set up for success, or there's a lesser chance that that happens. Usually using visual cues. This could be things like signs, photos, or labels to help orient them to the time or place. These are things that you could often buy or you can make yourself. Securing the environment. So again, it really depends on what environment they're in. If you're in the home, it could be using things like door alarms, certain safety latches. It could be installing cameras if you just want to be able to keep an eye on them. It could be, a bell on the door to hear if they are leaving or someone's leaving the home. If they're no longer safe to drive, it could be removing things like car keys, but just making sure that environment is set up for success for themselves, as well as you being their caregiver. This one's big as well, avoiding busy places. So, it's maybe not the best to go to the state fair together or Mall of America on a Saturday. So really being mindful of where you're bringing them, how many people might be there, how many people are going to be with you. So knowing if that's going to be overwhelming, confusing, or there's just a higher chance of them kind of disappearing in a large area. Engaging in meaningful activities. So again, could the wandering be due to just feeling bored or not having something to do in that moment? So having this something to turn to if they are feeling restless, or if we just need to use some distraction. Avoiding confrontation as well. So reassure and redirect rather than correct. So helping them remember that you're there to keep them safe. Oftentimes this can come in the form of what we call therapeutic fibbing. So, maybe if they're trying to go to work and they're no longer driving, but there is they're wanting to go back to this place and they think that's what they're doing for the day. So saying maybe, oh, the car is in the shop, but we'll check on that tomorrow, so that they're not trying to go to this place. But, why don't we do this activity instead? I'll let you know once that changes. So that one can feel hard for some, but knowing that that's something okay to do if it does provide that kind of redirection in that moment. And having a plan is really big, right? So if you do notice that someone is wandering more or that's been increasing, having them registered for different programs or safety alert systems, figuring out who's going to be involved in this plan, who's going to help if they do wander, having a photo of that person on hand, knowing places maybe that they've wandered in the past, telling neighbors or local authorities, as the next bullet says. So really planning for that situation. And then if it has already happened, kind of keeping tabs on the things of maybe where they went, were they looking for somebody? Just having those in mind if you need to make any tweaks or adjustments in your daily schedule or in your home environment. All right, and then our final one are hallucinations and delusions. So again, this isn't something that everyone experiences, but it can certainly come up. So hallucinations, what does that look like? So the hallucinations in itself are seeing, hearing, or sensing things that aren't there. So maybe for folks with a dementia, it's talking to someone who isn't present or someone maybe they used to know in their life. Believing that they're seeing things. These could be animals, again, people, different objects in the room, really can be anything. Responding to sounds or voices that no one else hears. And again, these can vary by person. Maybe there's a really specific hallucination that someone you work with has. It doesn't always look exactly like that. And delusions are firmly held beliefs that are false. So this often comes up as maybe accusing others or from stealing from them or hiding items, believing a spouse is an imposter or that they're unfaithful, thinking that there are people who are out there to harm them or insisting they're in danger or that someone is in their house. So these can be really scary for both the person with dementia as well as the caregivers, especially again, if these happen quite often or it's something new. So what can you do in these situations? First off is assess if this is distressing. For some people, these aren't distressing things that happen, right? Maybe they are saying they see their old friend from high school. If it's just they mention it, they seem all right in that moment. They're still doing what they're doing. They're not kind of fixated on it. Sometimes it's okay to just say, okay, let them experience that. Obviously, it's something you want to share with your provider. But if it's not distressing, sometimes we can just let it be in that moment. Remain calm. So, if you get worked up and worried, they will likely too. So doing your best to respond in a calm, supportive manner. That can be something like, don't worry, I'm here. I'll take care of you. Really, again, just validating that experience for them, but not reinforcing the false belief or the false something that they're seeing. Letting them know you're there and you're with them, even if it's scary. So again, acknowledging their feelings and find out what it means to the individual. It sounds as if you're worried, or I know this is frightening for you. That's going to be a lot more helpful than saying, no, that's not happening. There's no one in the room, or kind of trying to reason with them in that moment. Modifying the environment can be something big that you can do. So certain sounds can be misinterpreted. Certain lighting maybe could look like a shadow. Thinking about what your home environment looks like or wherever this person is. So reflections can look, if there's lots of mirrors and then there's like coat racks, different things can maybe produce these shadows or make it look like someone's in the room or someone's there when they're not. So again, reducing clutter as best as possible, really being mindful of their environment and what could be potentially misinterpreted. Be honest and reassuring. So again, it's probably not going to be best to argue or try to convince them that their belief isn't real or what they're hearing or sensing isn't real. So if they do have some insight and they ask you about, a hallucination or delusion they're having, you certainly can be honest. So if they say, do you see them? You might answer with, I know you see something, but I don't see it. So again, that's not making them feel silly for sharing that with you, but you're also not, saying that, yeah, I also see this. You're not denying what they see or hear, but you're also not arguing with them. So again, that can really depend on the level of insight. Some people really know that that's something that's going on for them and others do not. Again, keep it simple. So share your thoughts with them, but also don't overwhelm them with lengthy explanations or reasons about why that's not happening. If they think the neighbor's stealing from them and taking all their money, you probably don't want to go into a whole conversation about why that's not true, trying to find reasons to share with them that that's not true. anything lengthy is probably just going to make it more confusing and agitating. Distract and redirect, again, sometimes it may be something that's not quite distressing for them. So are you able to suggest, moving to another room or suggest a walk? These things could subside if you do maybe move to a different well-lit area or different environment where they feel more calm and safe. Or this could be turning attention to things that they enjoy again. If it's this music, is this a conversation, or is this a activity that you could do? And again, keeping your safety in mind. So if it is something that is quite distressing to them, it's really kind of increasing their agitation. There's safety concerns that are coming along with it. Like they are starting to do dangerous things to maybe try to protect you or protect themselves. Know that it's okay to ask for more help or have a plan for what to do in those moments. We want to keep caregivers and folks with dementia safe. So if that is reaching out for more support, or in some cases 911, know that that's okay to do. And then oftentimes like consulting with the doctor or following up about that with somebody else is a good idea, especially if it's happening quite often. All right, so kind of just leaned into that slide right at the end of the other one, but when's the best time to consult with a healthcare provider? Your neurologist, your PA, your whoever is helping care for this person with dementia as a medical professional. So, if a behavior is new, worsening, or sudden, so, if they've never experienced a hallucination and maybe that is something that they started bringing up, if that is something that happens for them, but it seems to be worsening or getting more severe, or if it's just a sudden change. And this could be for any of the behaviors that we know over today. Always reach out to your healthcare provider and request to speak with them and share more. Because it is helpful for them to know to provide the best care, as well as they can help us think about, is this a medication side effect? Would a medication be something that could be helpful in this moment? What have you tried? How can we be of help to you? So if a person is in pain, sick, or experiencing side effects from medication, if it's anything medication related, I would say reach back out to your healthcare provider. We really want them to know what's going on. Do they need to make an adjustment? Could they assist with a different medication, not trying to do those things yourself and letting them know how things are going. When you are starting to feel unsafe or the behavior is harmful or threatening, right? In the moment, you're not going to reach out to your healthcare provider because you're likely not going to be able to reach them at that point. So again, that would be when you maybe reach out to your support people, or, if it's more life-threatening, local authorities or others who can help. But knowing that, the behaviors do seem to be escalating and it does seem to be more threatening either for you or for them, trying to get in with your doctor as soon as possible. And when non-medication strategies have not been effective. So in general, medication therapies are considered after non-drug approaches have been tried. So, some of the things that we talked about today, but certainly if those are not working, they're not helpful, there is something else that just needs to be tended to from a psychotropic medication level, that is certainly a good time to share this information with your doctor and see what their thoughts are on the situation. All right, so getting to the end here. So some takeaways to remember following everything we just went over. Behavior is a form of communication, right? So remembering to be curious about what's going on. If something new is happening, kind of take that moment to think, what's going on with the person, what's going on in the environment, and how am I responding, or what's happening for me in this moment? I want to name too, sometimes it feels like there's not time to kind of have that pause button and think about all those things. But that's why, keeping logs or keeping notes of these things maybe afterwards can be really helpful, because then you can have some time to reflect, like, oh, I'm seeing a pattern here. Maybe this has been consistently happening. So I want to validate too that that's not always it's easier said than done. So it's okay if, things aren't, as the next bullet says, perfect. There's no perfect response, right? Your calm presence is going to do a lot more than any of those, bullet points we went over, right? Just you being a calm person is an intervention in itself. And again, everyone's so different. So there's not a right or perfect way to respond in these situations. It's what works best for you and what works best for that person as well. Just a reminder again that caregiving is very hard. That's a hard job to be doing, and taking care of yourself is very important. So knowing that you need your own support system to be a caregiver. So figuring out what it is that you need. Is it finding someone else who can also assist? Is it going to your own therapist? Is it talking with someone like a social worker or the doctor or someone at the clinic? Is it joining a support group? Is it taking a break? Is it getting some respite for this person? Knowing that all those things are okay, because if you're beyond stressed and you have so much going on, you're not going to be able to be an effective caregiver. And as that little note says over there, your best is good enough, right? You showing up for this person and trying to help them is sometimes as good as we can be. And again, consult with your healthcare provider. We really want them to know what's going on, what you're noticing, thinking about if maybe a medication could be helpful, going over these different strategies you've tried, and maybe hearing their perspective. All really great things to do just to be sure you're not missing anything, or that person is getting all the care that they need as well. On this slide, I just attached some additional resources and educational material. So some of these are, the first two are different videos of caring for someone with dementia. So I think they're great. They're, they'll maybe have a situation and they'll kind of talk through how one might approach that. So I think those are two really great ones. Again, the Alzheimer's Association has a lot of great topics or videos or articles that you can look into. Family Caregiver Alliance and Family Caregivers Online provide a lot of support for folks who are in these caregiving roles, and oftentimes have more dementia-specific education as well. Coping with Behavior Change in Dementia. That's a great practical book that you can get. That one even goes more in depth around, struggles around activities of daily living. So things like bathing or grooming or other things that oftentimes might come up as you care for someone with dementia. Teepa Snow is an occupational therapist and dementia care specialist. She has, I think, a book out there. She has a lot of great videos, but she has some great resources that are available as well. And again, finding a local support group, caring for yourself as a caregiver. We have a support group here at the Neuroscience Center that's going to be starting next month. So it's for folks who are caring for someone with memory loss. It's going to be the first Tuesday of every month from 2 to 4 p.m. on the first floor. So know that that's out there. And if you want more information, certainly reach out and we can provide that to you. But making sure that you're also taken care of, because again, if you're not at your best, it's going to be really hard to be at your best for somebody else.